What's up, guys? How's it going? This is Bella here today, supplying you with the introduction. Welcome to the Out of Our Minds podcast. Today's episode is all about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And this is a topic that really will help you to understand why you're doing the things you're doing. And when it comes to the spiritual realm, the self-discovery world, I think it's really important to continue to add language and different lenses and viewpoints on how to understand yourself, how to understand the things that you're doing. And that's really what we go into today. And what's cool about this topic is not only does it give you a lot of language and perspective on yourself, but you can apply it to things like your career, your relationships, your friendships, your social life, right? And I feel like for people that feel a little lost or kind of have that tinge of unease in their life where they're feeling unaligned or like they're in the wrong friend group, the wrong career, this is something that can help you to get to the root cause of maybe why you've arrived at that. And it really clues you into your motivations and what gets you going, right? As simple as what's getting you out of bed in the morning, what's getting you to go to your job, or what's getting you to not want to do those things, right? This is the root cause approach to your motivations. And I've personally found this topic really helpful for me to review in my own life for myself. Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And by asking why repeatedly, it really unveils the truth about who you are, and I think can help you to course correct per se and get into a more aligned, more really just fulfilling life. I think that's kind of what we're all here for. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And before we dive in, I have one tiny quick favor to ask of you. Wherever you are listening or watching, please go ahead and hit the subscribe or follow button. It's the best way to stay in touch with us, to see the episodes come in every single week. Every Wednesday we drop new episodes. And Nikki and I are also working on tons of stuff behind the scenes that we're getting really amped up to share with you guys. And the number one place to find out about all that is on the podcast. So please hit subscribe, please hit follow, stay in touch with us. We're just getting started and things are going to get much more exciting from here. That is all from me. Let us dive in.
What's up, guys? I'm Nikki.
I'm Bella, and this is the
Out of Our Minds podcast,
a playground for mystics and self-explorers to journey through the vast realms of the universe, cultural landscapes, and spiritual expansion.
Join us weekly as we dive into thought-provoking discussions that unveil the mysteries of existence and nurture the growth of our consciousness.
This is one of the shirts I wore in the first episodes.
Is it? Oh yeah, literally the first episode.
I mean, I wear this shirt all the time, but I somehow haven't worn it for a episode recording in a little bit.
What does it say on the back again? It just says the same thing,
like,
right?
No, it's like a whole thing, and it has like the bananas.
Yeah, the banana.
Like it's like music, flowers, bananas equals love.
You saw that shirt and you're like, this is it.
I was like, this is mine.
Yeah.
This was made
this
for me.
Is the one.
Just never forget. I was like, this shirt is inviting me to twerk. Must be purchased. So good. Yeah. Okay. So intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And I'm going to go ahead and apologize for the number of times that I'm going to eat my words when I say the word extrinsic, because I always trip on it. Nonetheless.
Extrinsic.
Yes. Extrinsic. It happens when I say them both next to each other that I'm like,
Intrinsic, extrinsic.
yeah. So for the first 5 minutes, we're actually just going to go over the pronunciation of the words. So yeah, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. What I'm excited about is bringing together kind of like the science and the spirit with this, because it's actually something that people have studied a lot, and especially in like neurobiology, and people like Andrew Huberman, who does the Huberman Lab podcast, like he'll talk about it too from a like cognition sense and like what's happening in terms of like the neurochemicals in the body. And so people have kind of like studied this in the business context for like, how do you motivate your team? How do you like get more work out of people? Like, is it better to pay them more versus do they want XYZ, right? And then on your, on a personal level, it's kind of figuring out what is motivating you and which type of motivation is going to help you to actually A, feel more fulfilled, and B, achieve more in an aligned way. So I have like a few like definitions and like study references and stuff that we can talk about to like paint a very vivid picture of this concept. But I thought first, as usual, we can start with explaining or sharing just like what our personal experience with our own types of motivation, what we value, like if there's been a journey at all with that, and just the personal anecdotes that have kind of like come up in this topic of what is motivating us, like what do we value and how have we seen different motivations play out in our life. A very basic definition is that intrinsic motivation comes from within, while extrinsic motivation arises from external factors. When you are intrinsically motivated, you engage in an activity because you enjoy it and get personal satisfaction from doing it. When you are extrinsically motivated, you do something in order to gain an external reward. That's like a very basic way to explain where intrinsic means that you're basically enjoying the activity for the activity itself and not looking to the end goal. Extrinsic is to say you're doing it to extract something out of it, get a reward, or to avoid punishment.
I mean, right off the bat, just hearing you share those two definitions, I'm thinking about just my career path alone. I feel like a lot of us will put ourselves on a career path where we're only focused on the extrinsic motivations of receiving a certain amount of money or living in a certain city, which, by the way, there's no like bad or good here. They're just different. And sometimes there is a place for extrinsic motivation to help us achieve something that just like needs to be achieved.
Right.
But when I think back to like where I was before I even started this personal development journey, I don't think I was in tune with my own inner being enough to even know what just made me happy to do, or I wasn't even thinking about it. So I think about my career path has totally shifted to focusing on what truly fulfills me, and kind of the extrinsic stuff becomes a byproduct of me focusing on the intrinsic. So for example, like really tuning into what fulfills me and following that path, and then allowing the money and abundance to be that byproduct of that. And when I think about fitness too, I feel like my path with fitness used to be this extrinsic thing of trying to look a certain way and trying to maintain like some sort of physique. And now when I work out, the approach that I take with the kinds of movement I do have completely changed. I wouldn't say completely changed, but the way that I do them and the frequency that I do them and just like my energy around the actions I do with my fitness routine, that has all really completely changed. And now I really focus on like the inner rewards that I get. So an example of that could be like the Peloton. I used to literally force myself to get on the Peloton and have this like really abusive relationship with it, where I would eat a certain way and then I would force myself to like work out in order to make up for like the guilt and shame I felt towards eating a specific way or eating unhealthy.
Almost like it was like avoiding, it was like a form of like avoiding punishment or like avoiding a certain feeling.
Right. So like the extrinsic reward there was like maintaining a weight or like maintaining a certain physique. Now I get on the Peloton like here and there, and the reward that I get is so different and more fulfilling because I'm really focused on the inner shifts that I experience and the deep fulfillment and pleasure I get out of like doing something difficult for my mind, and also facing up against some like inner darkness that comes up during, let's say, a hard Peloton ride.
Right.
And just like that example can really paint the picture of the contrast of how just like the way that you're rewarded back. Usually with the extrinsic motivation, I think that our mind wants us to believe that we'll get that physical thing or we'll finally get to that reward or the end goal, and then all of a sudden we're going to feel a certain way. With intrinsic, you're allowing yourself to access those feelings just by the process of being in the moment of like doing that thing. So I would say just living more in the present moment has naturally allowed me to focus on intrinsic motivation, which has naturally allowed me to gravitate towards things that really truly fulfill my heart and soul.
Right. And then you probably find that you're actually consistent and you're doing the things for longer term because this is what I can get into after this, is like there's actually in your brain and in your body neurochemically something happening that's different depending on what you're looking to as the reward. So like it makes sense that you start to enjoy the actual Peloton ride itself, for example, because you're getting joy and fulfillment, even if the joy is like through the pain of it. It's in that the ride itself that you are enjoying that process, right? Obviously, you also feel good after. You feel proud of yourself because you've accomplished something, but it's really much more tied to the act in and of itself and not like because you gave yourself like a cookie afterwards, right?
Right.
And what's
Right.
interesting is there's studies that show like one of the most interesting ones is in like children. They did this study where the kids were like drawing and painting just because they're kids and they enjoy it, right? And then they took a group of kids, and whenever they would draw and paint, they would give them a reward after, something that kids generally like a gold star or like something like that. And then when they stopped giving them the reward, they stopped painting and drawing, which was initially something they did just because they enjoyed it, right? Just to be creative. And then because they were given a reward, which then disappeared later, it changed the motivation and they stopped doing the thing that they originally liked doing, which is
Wow.
very powerful, especially in children, because it's kind of an example of like how much this then you would imagine how that would affect an adult who is probably, already overthinking or has more distractions away from the things that they actually really want to do or through like whatever arises from them naturally.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
your experience with the intrinsic versus extrinsic?
So one of the first things that came to mind when I was thinking about this was actually like growing up, I feel like my parents, they talked a lot about like they didn't use this exact language, but they would talk about things that now I understand as intrinsic values. And like I think I've shared how my dad like talks a lot about like the value of hard work and like enjoying, like putting your mind to something and working at it and, doing a good job. And that was something that was instilled in me as a child and actually also happens to be something that's Nikki and I have been going deep into our human design. And one of like my aspects is actually the love of achievement. And it's interesting to see how naturally I was always kind of drawn to the idea of finding what felt good just in and of itself and like enjoying just valuing things that were good just as they are, not necessarily because when you do them then they lead to something else. So that was like my general framework on like, studying for school or like showing up at a job or whatever, is I just generally kind of had instilled in me. And then because it felt good, this idea of like show up, work hard, like do the thing and like try to enjoy the grind, so to speak. And then obviously like reflecting back to high school and college, like there's times where I reflect back and see, okay, I was clearly operating on like, social status or like wanting to be cool or fit in or whatever. And what's funny is at the same time in my like business degree, we would do different like case studies and they talk a lot about in business how when you want to motivate your team or your company is you have to think about what they are motivated by. And as a leader, as like an organizational manager, that you have to be careful with that balance between giving them intrinsic motivation versus giving them extrinsic. And like they do all these studies on teams where they find, if they are more driven by like the why and the mission, like they will work harder and be more productive versus if there's mainly just like, benefits of like salary or even like cool perks and whatever from the company, that it doesn't always net out to be more productive. So I've had basically those two experiences of being interested in this concept from like the science, like business perspective and like the human behavior of like, oh, that's really interesting how some people kind of like it changes how well you do or like the fulfillment of your life depending on where your motivation is coming from. And then for me personally, knowing that when I focus on the internal motivations that are the joy of doing it itself, to put it simply, that I've always felt better. And whenever I catch myself doing something for quote unquote the wrong reasons or extrinsic reasons, depending on what they are, that I usually don't feel as good or it doesn't last, right? Like I do the workout for the, extrinsic thing and then I don't stick to it versus really learning to enjoy the process of it itself.
I feel like as you're talking, I'm having these realizations that there's two realizations that's coming up for me. The first one is we live in a world that is built on people like selling, and you benefit from people prioritizing external things and extrinsic motivations. So we live in like this very matrixy society where having the white picket fence and the family and the nice car and the good paying job is what we are sold on will bring us that intrinsic reward. So I think our minds are programmed in a way to believe that once we get that external thing, then we will receive the internal reward. But you usually will get there, like how you were saying, with focusing on the extrinsic motivation. It didn't really last that long. And I feel like the reason it doesn't last that long is because you usually will get there and realize, oh, like this actually didn't give me the feeling that I was hoping for. Or you get the cookie and then the feeling only lasts a good 4 minutes while you're eating it.
Exactly.
So
yes,
I feel like it's this journey of understanding like how to truly hold off on that instant gratification as well, and put the shift towards using your time and effort to really start cultivating that fulfillment from within.
Yes, 100%. And this is kind of getting to like why I think this topic is so huge, especially for young people today and like kind of the Gen Z crowd, and even like people kind of in between Gen Z and millennial, is because we are so driven from like a conditioning perspective that it's very built in to prioritize all of the external. And so I think it's no wonder that people wind up with like social media addictions, like substance addictions, like they're just very askew with what they want to do, and they feel very lost and pulled in so many directions because they don't have this like they're not looking to the inner guidance, basically, to put simply. And so that's why I think this can be a key to help you figure out, what do I want to do in life? But maybe even before I answer that, like what if I look at what is motivating me and what I'm valuing, and to use that as information to figure out, oh shit, maybe I'm not feeling good because I'm messing up like my dopamine levels because I'm always looking to the extrinsic, right? Like that's the science part of it that Andrew Huberman always explains, is like it's literally changing you on your, like they call it the dopaminergic circuits are being affected when you have the external reward. So you can use this as a starting place to figure out like what has been pushing me in life. Like what am I motivated by? What do I value? And are any of those things either external factors, or are they things that I think I should be doing? And kind of like doing a self-assessment on, does this feel like it's going to lead me in the right direction? And how can I add a few more things in that are intrinsic to help me continue to honor myself?
How do you feel like Gen Z can go about like actually integrating that? Like where can they start realistically?
Yeah.
Or anyone.
I feel like I think you can just start by simply asking yourself like the list of questions that kind of goes, why do I do blank, like this thing in my life? And just ask yourself why. Okay, for if it was to be a specific example, when I say like, okay, why do I edit episodes or videos? And there can be a lot of different answers. One can be like, well, I have to do it. It's my job responsibility. Or another reason why is also, I actually really like editing. I think it's fun. I get into a flow state, right? That's like a good thing to remember. Or, why do I have to go to the grocery store every week? Like you can just ask yourself different versions to start to understand, where is this relevant and where is it not? And usually the relevant parts are like, why am I working in finance? Why am I working in writing or in social media? And start to like basically self-reflect the underlying reason. I feel like it's good to go further and further. So like the initial reason might be, well, I like it. Okay. How did you get into it? Like, who inspired you to do it? What inspired you to do it? Like, what did you enjoy to do as a kid? And to kind of like keep coloring in the different aspects that start to answer why you do something. Like, I remember Milan was asking me a few months ago about what I enjoyed doing as a kid, like when no one was around, like when no one was telling me what to do. And I was telling him how I would always make videos. I would like shoot things on my little flip camera and then put them in like iMovie and just like cut up little films and make them and watch them. And I would never share them. I would just like make them and whatever, have fun with that. And I would steal my dad's camera to take pictures and videos of stuff and whatever. And he was like, wow, that like makes so much sense of like why you are in the field that you're in. And that's also something that I have used as a reflection point to be like, yeah, like I'm actually doing the thing that when I was a kid and nobody was telling me to do it, no one was like rewarding me for it, that's what I would do. So I feel like, yeah, just asking yourself why and to like keep going a few layers down to figure out if the motivations feel like something that is sustainable. So to say like, you know, if I wasn't getting the reward, would I still be doing it? Like if it wasn't for my salary at this job, like would I be doing it? And it's not to say that every single time it's extrinsic that it's bad, because I don't necessarily believe that either. Like there's obviously a role for rewards in life. And I think sometimes like it's maybe fits into your season of life, or it's actually like you can be motivated by multiple things. But yeah, just asking why like repeatedly, I think is a good place to start.
Or it's like the sequence goes that you lean into something because of the extrinsic, and then you eventually learn that it's about the intrinsic.
Right.
Or if you're not receiving the intrinsic, maybe you use that as like data to then pivot to something else. So for example, let's say you start a career where it has like a really good salary and you're thinking, damn, like this is amazing. I'm going to get paid so much. I'm going to be able to like live in a beautiful home. And you take the job, and then you take the job, and maybe you start to realize that it actually is super fulfilling for you. And your focus goes from the money to actually doing well at your job and showing up in a way that feels good to you. Or maybe the other route is you take the job with the high paying salary, and then you get there and you realize that you're getting no intrinsic value out of it and reward. So it's okay to lean into things through the extrinsic and then maybe utilize that as like a sample of like how it actually feels for you. And yeah, like even when I reflect back on my career and like the fitness journey and the wellness journey, maybe it always did start out as that extrinsic thing, but then it eventually led me to a deeper understanding of myself and a deeper understanding of what truly fulfills me.
Right, exactly. Like that's kind of the cool thing is a lot of the time receiving an external reward, it at least exposes you to the feeling that you're seeking. But then when you realize that it's fleeting because it came from something outside of you, then if you're having this level of consciousness and awareness of it, then you can say, okay, how can I create that feeling myself? Or how can I lean into something that gives me that feeling by just the activity or the thing in and of itself, like the, you know, there's nothing on top of it. I just do it, and that itself feels good. And yeah, I think that's a good reminder of why like it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just to understand like, hey, if you want to be feeling more fulfilled and if you want to be able to do things in the long run, like I think that's the other thing with what comes to mind with like, if we're saying Gen Z or whatever, I mean, it applies to anyone, but a lot of times we like get roped into wanting the success right now. And we have literally no patience for the long game. Like we have no patience to put in the time, like the months, the years to achieve something. And I know I have been guilty of that for sure. And I think only when I started to really lean into the process, like it's such a cliche, but it's actually the game changer of when you love the process and you're very present with what you're doing, that then you stop being so impatient about like getting everything that you want now. Like that's another indicator that you're very, very motivated by all the external stuff, is that you want your success ASAP and you don't want to like put in, you know, the quote unquote work. Like you don't want to basically be in the moments that lead up to it. You just want to get to the moment of success.
Yeah, that's making me realize that the intrinsic reward comes from the activities that bring you into the deepest state of presence. So for you to just look around at the things you do, that your mind kind of melts away and you're so immersed in the present moment, those are most likely the biggest activities and creative outlets that you have that will give you that intrinsic reward. And then to flip that on its head, maybe the things that aren't giving you the intrinsic reward, like you're saying, we can just start to learn how to be more present in the process. And
Right.
it will give you a little bit of reward, and maybe it won't. And maybe that's when you decide, this thing isn't really worth the $100,000 salary that I'm getting. So you start to kind of reestablish your meaning of what intrinsic reward is to you. But I love this idea of presence. And we talked about this. I feel like, what episode was that where we talked about flow state and being in the present moment? I can't remember.
It
But
might have been the discipline devotion one, because I remember the last
Yes.
question was you asking both of us, like, what are things that bring you into presence and flow?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I may have shared this before on the podcast, but I'll share it again. And it's a TikTok that I made where one time I was meditating and I just channeled this information about what all of our purposes are and how they are aligned with the things that bring us into the deepest state of presence, because you're no longer dealing with like the logical mind and you're really tapped into the divinity that is within you. So I think another point that we can start to bring in, like the mystical side of this and the soul story within this journey of like extrinsic versus intrinsic, is to talk about when you're feeling that deep level of fulfillment is when you are connected to the divinity, the consciousness within, presence, soul self, highest self, whatever it is you want to call that feeling of just being so connected to your true essence outside of the programmed mind, which if you want to learn more about that, go listen to the meditation episode 615. And it really allows you to just be in your true essence, almost the same feeling you had when you were a child before you were in that programmed state. So it's about being in that childlike energy, being in the present moment that connects you to that divinity. So start to connect to those things that bring you into that state.
Yeah. So beautiful. Oh shit. Did you hear the freaking news, you guys? If you didn't hear it, here you go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, motherfucking blast off. We are doing a goddamn live show. Yes, you heard that right. You heard me right. I'm freaking out. I hope you're freaking out, because I'm freaking out. It's gonna be so fucking fun. Nikki and I said to each other, you know what the Omis need? You know what these freaking incredible soul human beings need? They need a live show. They need to connect with us in real time through the glory of the internet, through a live stream show that is going to be called Live and Unhinged with Nikki and Bella. Why are we calling it that? Because, well, we are firm believers that the unhinged life is the way to go, and we want to bring you guys, the Omis, in on the energy. And because we are mysterious little people, we are going to slowly reveal the details to the ticket holders. Go to the link in the description to learn more about the show, get your ticket, and then you are going to be slowly revealed the epic information that is within this live show. It is going to be so fucking fun. Can you tell I'm excited? Because I'm freaking stoked. What could be better than spending 2 hours with Nikki and I in our most unhinged state possible? This is what we're promising you. This is the time that Nikki and I say, hey, you know how we get unhinged in the show on a regular basis? What if we took that up a notch for the Omis that are fucking diehard, that are ready to freaking go and want to go in deep to the rabbit holes, to the parts of our life and existence that are at the edge of our consciousness? Do I even know what that means? Do you even know what that means? I don't know. We're gonna find out. So go into the link in the description, read about the show, buy your freaking ticket. What the hell are you waiting for? It's gonna be sick. I can't wait. What is there more to say? I'm going insane. Let's go back to the episode. Thank you so much. I want to read and share a couple of more like just examples, like this interesting study on it, and then another, actually, then to tie it back to in like the mystical spiritual sense, there's this really great book by Light Watkins called Travel Light, Spiritual Minimalism for a More Fulfilled Life, and there's a quote in it that's like perfect for this. But so first I want to share, is this cool to go into some more of the examples? Okay, so there's actually a study that the NIH did on the psychology of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And one of the excerpts that I found very interesting was they were saying Motivation is an integral component of human experience. Children spontaneously explore novel items, and adults autonomously engage in new hobbies, even in the absence of clear extrinsic reinforcers. And this is like what Nikki is saying about finding the thing that you naturally feel present and in flow with. Thus, not all actions are driven by tangible external stimuli or outcomes, known as extrinsic motivation, but are driven by internal drivers, known as intrinsic motivation, where the activity is perceived as its own outcome. And then what's very interesting is in this study, they haven't like per se completely proven this, but it was looking like this was the outcome psychologically. And they say that the NIH study cites that the dysfunction of intrinsic motivation, so like the lack of having intrinsic motivation, may contribute to psychological issues as, quote, apathy in neurological disorders, anhedonia in depression, which is anhedonia is inability to feel pleasure, and negative symptoms in schizophrenia. So that actually, again, like having the absence of intrinsic motivation, and this kind of makes sense when you break it down in terms of what that behavior would look like day to day, it leads to certain psychological disorders or like mental health issues. Because if you think about it, like to not have a drive from within it's very difficult to feel like you want to do things. It's very difficult to feel joy or to show up and go to work or to show up for a friend or whatever it is, because there is a lack of like the juice coming from within. So that's kind of where like the excess of external motivations, I think, ends up kind of sucking the life force out of you, because you've basically given away to another person, place, or thing or feeling, that desire that you would normally have within you to show up and like do the things you want to do and be or do or whatever. Like it basically is letting that go to someone else or something else, which is
I feel like what I know about trauma and the subconscious can tie into this as well. Pretty much when we go through traumatic events in childhood, our brain takes almost like a snapshot of that emotion that we felt and whatever it is that we were experiencing as a threat. And a lot of times when we're children, we aren't able to really process that emotion. So we store it, we store a program in the subconscious, and that energy doesn't really go anywhere. And we start to get into these states as adults where we're easily triggered because we haven't yet healed the belief or the actual energy within the body. So just one thought alone can bring us down into a spiral of thinking that we're back in that same scenario. And I think a lot of us are walking around with unhealed trauma and we are not knowing how to regulate it. So we're reaching for things outside of ourselves to regulate that feeling. And then what happens is the brain starts to associate, let's say you pick up your phone every time you're feeling anxious, it starts to associate that with, oh, okay, this device helps us ease this feeling. And then as you keep doing that, you start to receive more dopamine than what your body is actually meant to receive. And you're frying the dopamine receptors, kind of like what you were saying at the beginning of the episode. And you will no longer get that same hit of dopamine from just one scroll. You're going to have to scroll for more and more and more. And this goes hand in hand with what you're saying, that as we seek for that external dopamine and that external reward, we are going to eventually have no way of feeling it from within, because then going on a beautiful walk with your friend or just like literally sitting on the beach and like staring at the fucking water is not going to give you the same dopamine and reward as it normally would if you weren't so addicted to the things that were giving you that really cheap dopamine. It's like you have to be able to get your body into a state of working hard to receive dopamine back. And I don't mean working hard as in like hustling and grinding, which that can be the case, but it can also be like working hard to just be present and like be in the present moment. But yeah, it really does connect everything with like the trauma, the dopamine, the addiction, and what it is we are believing will rid us of that really uncomfortable emotion.
Yeah. I mean, that's why people, I think, are starting, I should say, I guess scientists are starting to say that like social media addiction is like similar to what cocaine does to the brain.
Oh yeah,
I think
believe it.
I would have to fact check that, but it's like when you hear about why cocaine addictions are so devastating, it's really sad because then it's like even people in your life that you loved and that love you, like literally don't cut it. Like they don't make you feel pleasure or joy or love because your like neurochemical balance is all fucked up. Like your dopamine and everything is completely wrecked because you've been able to spike it like that with nothing, right?
Wait,
It's
I'm
like,
having like a moment now realizing this in terms of relationships these days, because there will be times where like Peter and I are sitting on the couch and we'll both be scrolling on our phones. And I'm just like, I have a moment where I put my phone down and I'm like, this is sad.
I
This should
know.
not be a
Same.
thing. But
I
then
know.
there's another
It's so
half of me
hard.
that's like, it's fine. Like fucking scroll. It's fine. And it's making me realize that the same way a fulfilling career takes work and then you get the reward back, a relationship also takes work in that same way. And a lot of people aren't feeling the happiness of just sitting next to their partner because they're
Right.
so attached to the phone. And this has like been something that I'm really trying to make a cautious effort of like really making time throughout the week to have like deep and enticing conversations that like stimulate our brains as opposed to like being so stimulated by TikTok.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, dude. It's huge. And like I'm guilty of it too. Like it's really hard because of that pull and how much sometimes we just don't want to be doing the work or we don't want to like, be using our brains to have a conversation or whatever after a long day. But that's totally another place to self-assess and to ask yourself like basically like in my mind I'm like having a pharma commercial about are you having symptoms of extrinsic motivation in overdrive? But actually I'm like if you are finding that the things that once brought you joy and the things around you are literally not cutting it, and this is something that I see so clearly in people and like I'm able to observe it in myself and in others immediately when I see someone's relationship to a certain vice basically. And this was the epiphanies I was having while watching the Jewel documentary, which we can go into a little bit, but just seeing how like if your relationship to the things around you is not in check and is not conscious, you will be consistently pulled away from what is actually present, from what just is. And that's people or conversations or nature, the sunset or whatever, or even like stress or intense emotions, is if we're constantly putting literally something in between us and whatever is actually reality for that moment, then that's why you are disconnected from yourself and from joy and from be able to fill yourself up from the inside out.
Right.
And this is actually reminding me of the quote from Spiritual Minimalism. This is what the book looks like.
What
Very
is that on the
cute.
front? Oh, it's like a rip in the.
It's like
hoodie.
a rip in it, and then this guy, Light Watkins, it's like his eyes there.
Cool.
Yeah, this guy's amazing. He's like a huge meditation teacher actually. Like he's been doing it for a very long time, and I think he's like coached like very wealthy, successful people, and he's doing like talks all around the world right now. But he's also, I mean, I love his name, Light. It's literally like how he is. He's just such a light. But
Is
in
that
this
his
book,
real name?
I don't know, but I think so. It seems like it. I'm not really sure. It could be a stage name. Who knows?
That's really cool though.
But so in this book, it's exactly what we were just saying. It speaks to, so the book is about like it's spiritual minimalism to live a more fulfilled life. And the backstory of Light is that he has apparently lived out of a backpack for like I, I want to say like a decade, like a really long time. And he travels all around the world doing like keynote speeches and all this stuff. And he just lives out of a backpack. And so the book is like basically a new take on minimalism. So this is two of the quotes that I found very relevant. It says, spiritual minimalism is more of an inside out approach than the conventional outside in approach to making space. Making space meaning like if you were to clear out your room or your house. In other words, this is not a get rid of my stuff to be happy approach to minimalism. Rather, this is a get happy inside first and see what happens after that approach to minimalism, which I think is so genius and so like the second you read that, you're like, that clicks because it's again saying that, oh, if I get rid of all my stuff, then I'll be happy. Sure, it will probably help, but you're not getting to the root cause of why do you have so many things in the first place and why do you keep accumulating? So then he goes on to say, a spiritual minimalist makes the majority of their decisions from their own inner guidance. And the best way to make sure your inner guidance is providing you with the highest quality of information is to turn up the volume on what I call your heart voice through practices like daily meditation. Yeah, on point. So
This like connects with everything we've been discussing.
it literally connects perfectly. Yes. So I read this and I was like, this is such a great way to think about almost like the physical ways that this would play out and to hammer home that idea of why it matters to do all the things that fall under this umbrella of like prioritizing the self, being authentic, finding your inner guidance, like finding stillness, meditation, like basically creating a new baseline for how you operate, like regulating your nervous system, etc. Because I think this is why I really take to this idea, because it's like updating the software so that then you're already operating from a place where you're naturally looking to yourself and to what you can provide first before getting it from external places. So then with the motivation aspect, it's like literally if you can work on yourself and show up to do the things that recalibrate your system to be internally motivated, then the rest falls like a domino, where you're going to be able to see very clearly when, going to the party is actually just trying to fit in, or when, having a drink is to fit in, or when not having a drink is to fit in. Like it's all the different ways that then you're like, wait, I can see so much more clearly what it is to be coming from the inside versus the outside. And I think this is what has helped me now. I can see so clearly when people around me, when their relationship to the thing is unconscious and they're doing it from a place of like external reward.
It's interesting you say that because I was looking over our human design charts today, and one of your gifts, like one of your top gifts, is to be able to read the room and like to walk in and be able to like assess everyone and like how they're feeling just by like looking for 1 second.
Yes, it's actually, yeah, dude, for sure. Like I definitely find that in a lot of social scenarios is I just immediately can tell, like, it's hard to describe because sometimes it's very just like energetic or emotional or visual, but yeah, it's like just being very well attuned to the people around me. But I do think anyone can start to see all those things more clearly too when you're just at that calmer, more like open, authentic, space.
Right. It's also interesting too to think about the different life paths that unfold when you're focused more on the intrinsic with like a sprinkle of extrinsic versus the opposite, and just what kind of life will really unfold from those two paths. And
right,
to think also you're always like in the right place at the right time, so maybe it is necessary for your soul to like guide you down the extrinsic path to learn certain things. So I also want to just reiterate again that the way that you're motivated and led is always in alignment with the path that you're meant to go on.
Right.
Sometimes we're led to a really shitty relationship because we have that extrinsic motivation of like being seen with someone and not being alone, and God forbid I go to the holiday party without a partner, and all of that type of just like that kind of thinking. But then maybe you meeting that partner and dating was actually a part of your journey to learn specific lessons. Right. So I do believe that as you get deeper into your spiritual path and you learn more about the true essence of who you are, you get less and less motivated by the extrinsic because you don't have to learn the deeper lessons that come from focusing on that. Does that make sense?
For sure. And then I feel like that's where you get to a place where it's not to say that you can't have any vices and anything that's like from, not from you. Like, obviously, it's, I'm not like the monk on the fucking mountain who's like, you must not like do any fucking thing that's outside of you other than sit here under this tree. Because at least the middle way, right, where we are, like in our life, is I do think what happens then, and this is what I've observed in Milan actually, is I was explaining to him like my thoughts based off of the Jewel documentary of how this kind of was like feeding my input on this. But that I think then if you have an awareness of what is driving you, what is coming from within, what is something that you're relying on from outside, what vices do you have, whatever, that at least if you are in a authentic you're in like the camp of authentic and you're like aware and conscious and you're like at least actively participating in the decisions that you're making, that then the decision to drink or smoke or do whatever at a party, take like a psychedelic, blah, 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 like those are aligned, authentic decisions that aren't inherently evil or wrong or don't make you bad just because they do involve an extrinsic reward. So I think that's like the important thing to remember. At least my life philosophy would be like, I think it's fine. And I wouldn't want to be the type of person who's like militant about this kind of thing and is like, no, you can only like look within and you can never have anything that alters your state. Like, I don't think that's realistic anyways for most people. And I think that's where at the other side of this journey, if you were to like try to be more intrinsically motivated for a while, that then when you do something that gives you an outside reward, it like actually hits better and it's more of like a fulfilling experience.
Right.
Do you feel like that can like a thing?
Yeah, and this is something I've been learning because I think when I first started like the wellness journey, I was just doing things in order to like fit in and to like receive a certain almost like external validation from people. And it's kind of what you said with that quote of the minimalist sharing, don't get rid of your clothes in order to, what was the quote?
It's this is not a get rid of my stuff to be happy approach to minimalism. This is a get happy inside first and see what happens after that approach.
Right. I would apply that to alcohol, partying, right?
Yes.
Like focus on being happy and then everything will naturally fall the way that it's meant to. And then you going to the party to hang out and be social is going to come from a very fulfilled place. So something that I've been doing lately is just checking in. I used to like force myself to like be in these boxes and it would put so much pressure because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And I think I honestly ran into this with the whole alcohol journey too, that I just wanted to like be good and be seen as like a good spiritual leader. So that alcohol was something that would make me bad. Right. And the second I just started to like actually focus on being happy, then I could make the decision of, do I want this cocktail or not, from an empowered place instead of a disempowered place. Right. And it really helps to check in with, is my nervous system regulated right now? Do I feel like I am the one making this choice? Or do I feel like I'm making this choice from a place of trying to numb or not feel what I'm truly feeling? Right. So for example, the other day, it was Sunday. We went out late. We saw a concert and we got home. We went to our friend's apartment and we got there at like 12:30. And then we were up like talking for like hours. And we got back to our house at like 4:00. And I woke up the next morning and I was so tired, like kind of on edge, like not really feeling in my body. And I sat on the couch and I'm like, I even said to Peter, I'm like, do I numb out now with Bravo and reality TV? And I literally made that choice to not do that because I felt very unregulated because of the lack of sleep and just like staying up and not really, I just didn't feel well rested. Yeah. And I made a choice in that moment that no, like I'm not going to sit here on the couch and numb out because that's going to just kind of show my mind that whenever I feel this way, this is going to be my outlet. So I turned on Gaia, and that was when I like texted you and we had that phone call and I told you that I watched a Gaia episode.
And it ended up having like a synchronistic message in it.
Yes. Crazy.
Can't make this shit up.
Literally. Like if you just always tap into your soul and make decisions from that place, it will always lead you somewhere that you're truly like going to learn and you're really meant to be. So yeah, that would be like my biggest learning from everything we're discussing now with the vices is just to tune into when you're regulated. And yeah, maybe there are times where we feel unregulated and we pick up our phone. Like we can all say we've been there, but it's about just adding a little bit more consciousness and awareness to when we are falling into that mindless and unconscious behavior, and seeing if we can take baby steps towards just being a little more conscious, and maybe start out with the ones that are the most obvious in your life. And you don't have to go cold turkey, but or maybe you do if you feel like you need to, but maybe just taking steps of, okay, this is like a normal time that I would jump into this behavior. Let me just check in, like, what is going on within myself right now, and let me get familiar with the emotions that are arising when I lean into this behavior.
Yeah, that is really powerful. Do you have another example of like a time where you made that like conscious switch? Because those are really helpful.
I posted it on my story, but when we were in Mexico and I like posted that I was drinking a margarita, I felt so relaxed, like very calm. I was sitting on a fucking lounge chair at an infinity pool on the coast of Cabo. Like, I felt very relaxed.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I'm like, you know what? I want to have a margarita right now.
Yeah.
And it felt like I made that choice from an empowered place. And then I shared it on my story because I think I'm still navigating this path with alcohol. Like, I truly have not found like this rhythm and flow with it that feels good. But I wouldn't say it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like I know. You know what I think it is? I'm trying to put myself in a box when there's no box.
Right.
Like, the box is I choose when I want to drink and I choose when I don't want to. And there are times where I feel fine to. And there are times where I make the empowered decision not to.
Right.
And I think it all resorts back to me really tuning into my body and checking in with what kind of emotional state and nervous system state that I'm in.
Which your human design authority is emotional, correct?
Yes.
So that's the other interesting thing here of what it looks like to check in. Like, when I check in with myself, it's the gut, black or white. And that's how I've also made my decisions with alcohol, is I just keep asking my gut, and every fucking time my gut's like, nope, we're good. And I'm like, okay, like, sounds good. Like, that aligns with me, right? Right. And then for you, it's you're checking in, and it maybe like it's just a slightly different experience, but that's another reason why, if you're not sure what it is to check in with yourself, like, either experiment with different, sensations of what you're listening to, and then kind of compare like the data of how you feel afterwards. I just said data, like data. I couldn't not get that out of my mind. Compare the data. And then you can also look at human design, which I literally cannot go an episode now without plugging human design, because
I have another thing that I want to add with the human design. I'm pretty sure one of my, I don't know what it is, my trial and error. It's not a gift, right? What is that? Remember on my chart, it says something about me teaching through trial and error.
Oh, this is your personality type. Because you have is it the 6-3? Or it's the one
5.
It's the one that's like you like try things out for yourself, experiment with. I think you're the Great Life Experimenter, right?
Yes.
That one.
So a part of that is to know that when you're trying something, there's no such thing as failure, because you're meant to experience the spectrum of results in order to pull it together and then share what you learn. And I think this has been
makes so much sense for you.
Yes, it's been such an interesting journey for me, because I used to be so hard on myself that when I would experiment with something that didn't work, I would think I'm a failure. And now I use it as like, okay, I think I shared this before, but it's like, great, now we know. And you just pick up on like these little tiny data points. And we spoke about this in depth in episode 1 with like the alignment path of just like using your experiences to point you towards what works for you. And I think it's also important to know that in order to pick up that data, you just have to like be intentional about being like, okay, last night I did X, Y, and Z, and it made me feel this way. Do I enjoy that experience? If the answer is no, then truly put that in your back pocket and do something with it the next time you're in that situation.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like step 2 is like have the courage and like the willingness to listen to that information, right? Like, if you are checking in with yourself, like I was literally just talking to someone who she was telling me earlier this year that she actually doesn't like love drinking, but she'd been like drinking a lot and just was like, I feel like it's whatever. I'm just used to it for social stuff. And she was asking me about my experience with it. And I was just like, yeah, I just don't like it. Like, I just have this knowing also, like, part of my like personality thing is that I'll just know something and I'm just like very clear on it. And I don't have to like necessarily even live it out to know that it's true for me or like a universal thing. And that's been my like a way to understand if I'm interested in something or not. And with her, I was like, just generally, I was like, if you don't like it, you should listen to that and like
Yeah.
test out, how it feels for you to do it or not. And I actually think last night she was showing me her personality type, and I think she has not the same one that you do, but very similar with like the one that has one of the personality numbers has to do with like trying things out and like seeing if it works for you or not. And this month she's doing Sober October and she's been like loving it and realizing how much of the time she was like forcing herself to be an extrovert when in reality she's an introvert and doesn't always like to party. And
Mm.
because she like took a break from drinking, now she also has this additional data point on how she feels doing XYZ and what she actually wants to be spending her time doing.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like the big lesson behind that story is just try things out. And when you're getting that intuitive pull towards a certain direction, what is the worst that could happen from just testing
Right.
something out? You
Right.
pick up data points, and there's no such thing as failing. And just be very gentle on yourself as you experiment with new behaviors, because your mind has been programmed for so long that it does take a little bit to really readjust and reestablish safety in your body with a new behavior and a healthy one.
Right. For sure. Yeah. Like there's definitely a through line of coming back to the inner guidance in whatever way you can so that you just it's like you just become your own authority, because this is the whole crux of this conversation is the more you push off and continue to be motivated by the external, then you're just ignoring and literally changing physically what your body and mind and like what subconsciously you always do in every scenario. And then I feel like Joe Dispenza has some quote on this of like, if you just keep making the same decisions over and over, like nothing is going to change until
Yeah.
like you actually change the inside.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Should we chat Jewel, or is there something else we want to dip into? What are you thinking?
Jewel away.
Okay. So I think this would be interesting just because I'm kind of just curious to hear your thoughts on this, because I watched the limited series about Jewel on Netflix. It's like called Big Vape, like the rise and fall of Jewel. And I'm guessing everybody knows what a freaking Juul is, but basically Juul is like the e-cigarette that, came out and gained popularity in like 2014, 2015. I remember like in college, they were like everywhere. And this Juul documentary, it's pretty interesting to watch. It wasn't like remarkable just because of my takeaways. I felt a little like, I was sharing this with Nikki, that I was confused because they talk about how like, yeah, it's not really good to be like so addicted to nicotine, and especially with kids using it. But they don't really end on a note that's like, don't use Juul. It's kind of like inadvertently an ad for Juul at the end. It's very weird. So
I hate that.
I don't know how
hate
to,
that.
dude, it's really weird. Like this doesn't really give anything away, but like the last scene is literally like this young girl who was one of the first influencers that got invited to like a Juul launch party. And she's on camera fucking pulling the Juul and being like, yeah, I don't really see a point in quitting yet. Like, I'm kind of enjoying my life and partying, and I'm 24 and like this works for me. Which I was like, fine. I guess pretty solid line of reasoning. But also, why is this the last scene of a documentary that just spent like 4 hours like trying to explain how like this is kind of a problem and that there's like a lot of gray area in like whether Juul was like to blame or should be held accountable for like all the addiction and like all the fucking stuff that unraveled because of Juul.
Maybe they were trying to paint the picture that, hey, we're so honest about what happened with these like health situations. We know we're being honest about what's in it. But look, people love it.
Yeah, that's honestly kind of the accurate like the summary. So yeah, as it relates to this topic, I found myself having just like a lot of pings throughout the series of just thinking how interesting it is to see when people are not even realizing the relationship they have to something outside of themselves, right? Like an extrinsic reward or motivation or whatever. I'll caveat by saying, like, I understand with like nicotine, there's like a safe way to use it. It's actually can be like a very healthy, like substance to use for cognitive function and focus. I know there's like good studies out there and there's safe ways to administer it. This is more so about what I think happens when as a society, we don't understand or teach people the root of like, why are you looking for something outside of you to fix what you have going on inside? And how, especially with young people, they're like very much like vulnerable to these kinds of things. So what's interesting is like the whole premise of the company Juul was their mission statement was to improve the lives of 1 billion smokers. So they wanted to basically like, they didn't want to get rid of combustible cigarettes completely. They wanted to get rid of them and then put Juuls in people's hands. So they're not like getting rid of smoking addiction. They're like, let's make a product that is just marginally more healthy, which in the short term seems like it was healthy and whatever. What I'm interested in is this concept of like how all the like employees and the founders and the investors and like all these people, when they're so like passionate about making Juul like reach so many people, that there's not really this awareness of like, but you are perpetuating this culture of having a fixation or an addiction to something that you have to have every single day. And that if you don't
care,
have
they
it,
want money.
right. They don't care. They don't want money. Right. I do think there was some positive intention from the founders. They're not interviewed in the documentary, but like there's like archival footage of them. And they seem like they had good intentions overall. But definitely it gets blurry because like, I don't need to say so many details, but like for one, I was telling you how they formulated the like nicotine to have this thing called nicotine salt in it so it didn't burn your throat as much so you could get a bigger hit. And it's funny, I was telling Nikki the one time that I pulled a Juul was in college at like a party or something, and it hurt my throat so badly that I was like, get this fucking thing away from me. Like that hurts. Why I was like looking around at people, I was like, why are you doing this? It literally hurts. Like I don't understand. And then I realized you get used to it. But point is, obviously there was some level of like intentionally making it more addictive because they were trying to mask the burn of taking in that much nicotine at one time. So long story short, what happens is like young people get their hands on it. And because they're young and in high school and college or whatever, everyone's like fucking talking about the Juuls and the trend of it and whatever. And so they get in everyone's hands. And then people are like, kids are fully addicted to it and smoking the equivalent of like, it's like 3 Juul pods a day, which I think is 3 packs a day of cigarettes or more because of the like increase of nicotine amount. And they show like the kids getting in the hospital for like their fucking lungs collapsing, like all this crazy shit. And the whole time I'm just thinking to myself, I wonder like how many of these kids started using Juul, or even people started using Juul simply because it was like the cool trend thing to do and because they're looking to cope or fit in or feel better about themselves from the outside in. And the aspect of addiction that is coming from trying to fill a need. And this is like, we talked about this in the mirrors episode. The mirror of addiction is showing you where you are like repressing or not addressing something within you that wants to like come out or be transmuted or healed. And I definitely think a lot of addiction, especially as it relates to like smoking cigarettes or using a Juul or nicotine or whatever, comes from that because so many people use it in like work environments where they're stressed and they have like a smoke break to go outside and, you know, quote unquote, get some air, even though they're not breathing air the whole time. And they're like getting a hit that makes them feel better versus being able to, the other, you know, way through stress would be to like understand like the root cause of it. Maybe it's like this career is not right for you. Maybe you need to like slow down or take time to eat better or sleep better, whatever it is. And it just became so glaringly obvious that like as a culture, we don't really have an understanding of this whole intrinsic extrinsic thing and how it relates to young people, especially as they're learning to be a freaking human and they're like anxious and trying to figure out who they are, that the more we hand them all these flashy fun things, that they just become disconnected from themselves. And I think this is what's happening with our Gen Z kids today, is they're having such a hard time because potentially on purpose, they're being like propagandized with all this social media and news and alcohol and drugs and all this stuff all the time, that they only know how to feel okay by getting shit from outside. And then it's like no wonder that they're depressed and frustrated and lost and they don't want to work or do anything because they're bombarded by external factors that are never going to give them what they need. And the Gabor Mate quote, actually, it's not Gabor Mate, it's this physician, which I'll have to look it up, but this quote that goes, there's nothing more addicting than something that almost works. And it's like,
you always want more.
You always want more. And you're like, oh, felt so good, but not good enough, clearly, because you have to keep going back to it. And it was just very like shocking to see how much just the documentary barely addressed like this idea of, you know, why are people even so reliant on these vices to the point where like they don't even realize it. Like they just have no idea that you literally cannot leave. They can't leave their house. They freak out if they can't find their jewel. Like that is such a level of fixation that is clearly gone awry.
Right. And when you say the words disconnected from themselves, I'm starting to even like just see that in a deeper meaning, that the second you are leaning on something externally to regulate yourself, you're losing the information that you gain by being with that discomfort. So a part of the most fulfilling and soul-aligned path for anyone is to navigate and transmute discomfort and anything that is within you. And that is where you gain the knowledge on which direction you're meant to go, or where you're supposed to be in life. Or I shouldn't say where you're supposed to be, because you're always meant to be wherever you are. But
right.
I'm
where
saying
you would
like
feel better.
Where you would feel best. Right. So anytime that we are shoving down that discomfort, we're actually essentially what we're doing is like we're throwing our inner compass and our intuition in the back, and we're kind of ignoring it. And we're saying, no, this thing outside of me, this feeling I'm getting from this is more important than the fulfillment that I would feel from actually listening to what's within. So the reason why this happens to be so fucking difficult when we're first beginning this journey of weaning off the external is because the inside is really uncomfortable and filled with a lot of messy emotions and thoughts. And that's why that first dark night of the soul is always the hardest. Because
and
you're
that's
really...
why high schoolers and stuff are like, obviously they're anxious and trying to figure out how to fit in and who their friends are and what they want to do with their life, that the inside is like very uncomfortable.
Right. And especially the generations now that are dealing with a shifting world. Like we're seeing all of the systems and outdated systems crumble right before our eyes. And they are the generation that is going to experience that shift, as we already are. So whereas our parents, you know, they went to school, maybe they moved to America, they wanted to get the job that gave their family the most freedom, and it was just like a very matrixy way of thinking. Now we're becoming awake and aware to the fact that, oh, if I don't want to work for this company and I can actually start my own job, which some parents were kind of ahead of the game with this and starting their own career paths. Like your dad has been entrepreneurial, right, for many years. But there is like that old outdated way of thinking that is crumbling. And I think a lot of children are seeing how many people are making money online and how much money people are making online. And why would they go sit at a desk for 8 hours a day when they can post one freaking thing online and make double the money? And it's just like a mismatch of what they're experiencing versus what the system wants them in. So that anxiety and that discomfort is really, really present. And I think we can even speak for ourselves with this too. We're at that transitional point too, with like being a part of that generation and being, I feel like we're kind of the younger ones that are at the forefront of like leading and like being an example of what can be possible for you in your life when you really start turning inwards. And not to paint the picture that we're perfect and like That's not what I'm trying to say.
We're the guinea pigs. We're trying
Yeah,
it
yeah,
out.
guinea
We
pigs.
I feel okay. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
We're still trying things out. And please, I still have my vices with the fucking Bravo TV. We all have our things that we're working on.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially what I'm getting at is just that discomfort that if we were to really sit with that, that is kind of holding the keys to our highest timeline. I think there was something I posted once on my Instagram that our addictions suppress the emotions that hold the keys to our highest timeline. So really just like let that sink in and start to befriend your discomfort and see where that takes you in life.
Yeah. Here's my question. I feel like when I think back to my time in middle school and high school, even college, and like current like high school age, like school age basically people, do you feel like it feels like it's very part of the path to go through that phase of looking basically everywhere except for yourself, like looking outside for everything, because arguably, one, it's kind of built into our DNA as like tribal creatures, and like that, like apparently, like biologically, the feeling of being rejected is like literally feels like you're gonna die, like you actually are. It physically feels painful, and so part of me kind of sees this as like just holding space for that phase of life, and to not necessarily say like, oh, I want, high schoolers should never experience those things. I mean, maybe at some point in the future, as we like evolve and, cultural norms change, we start to teach kids to like turn inward at a younger age and to like value things within rather than out. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. How do you feel like that's just essential in a way? Like there is the inevitable of school age kids just going through the ringer of like doing all the things outside of themselves to basically learn and figure out what it actually is to go within.
Yeah, for sure. I think it kind of connects to what we were talking about before with that trial and error of learning and picking up data points by experiencing the opposite. But I think it also is our opportunity as a collective to really start putting alternatives in the hands of young children, just because of the depth of anxiety and despair that kids are feeling these days. We need to also be providing deeper levels of like just like holding and comforting, like you're saying, and not shaming and saying that they're doing the wrong thing, but kind of giving them the space to feel what they're feeling so that they don't resort to thinking they need to go do all of the external things in order to cope. So I think as I would step into, let's say, parenthood, for example, I think the way that I would best navigate this, having a high schooler, and I'm just saying this from my own naive ignorance of not even having a child right now. I don't know what it's like and the depths of like difficulty that one goes through in order to parent someone. But just from my like level of ignorance here, I would probably take the route of like really trying my best to be a really safe container for children to express the full spectrum of emotions, and to never make them feel like what they're feeling is not valid and okay. Because as soon as we do that, that's when they start to feel like feeling not okay is an issue, and that they need to solve that with something outside of themselves.
Yeah. Like we basically just have to help people to understand themselves further at every level. Like that's usually what the key is like with any young person when you're going through something, instead of just like, this is exactly what you're saying with the addiction or whatever it is holding the key to figure out what you really need on a deeper level. But we don't ever, we generally don't encourage people to do that, or people don't know to do that. And I do think now it's like, this is what is cool about this collective shift is we're putting out more ways of being than the one that we've all been prescribed for so long.
Right. And if someone is sitting here listening to this now, and maybe you have a friend or a family member that is dealing with any sort of addiction, or you see them kind of leaning into a behavior that you think would be best if they slowed down or maybe stepped away, instead of forcing them to change and telling them what they're doing is wrong, I think the avenue that we can take is just stepping in as that safe container. Like I'm saying, maybe you provide them with that space to just express how they feel, And then little by little, they get to know themselves on a deeper level, like how you're saying. And that can be a really healthy avenue for someone to explore that, oh, maybe I can actually like start to feel what's inside of me. And then you start to connect to your true self. You start to feel that fulfillment. You start to figure out more like clear decision making that you want to kind of like integrate into your path and your life. And then that's where like the fulfillment and the intrinsic stuff starts to come in. It doesn't really come in by like connecting it back to that original minimalistic quote of like just stealing people, not stealing, taking someone's clothes out of their closet and being like, you have to be minimalistic now. It's like, no, how about you like give them the space to explore what's making them feel like they need those things. And then they will naturally start to take their own initiative.
Yeah. Yeah. I literally wrote when I first thought of this topic idea that the new paradigm is all about the inside world.
Yes.
Like it's all about remembering that everything outside of you out here is actually like coming from in here.
Right. Right. Yep.
Amen.
Powerful. Every episode. Amen.
We're like, round of applause. Good stuff. Another win.
Beautiful. I loved that. I feel like that is a really potent message that I think a lot of people need to hear. And whether it applies to your own personal journey, helping navigate through like a relationship you have or a friendship, I think this information can really, really help people.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited for the feedback on this one because I feel like this always, I don't know, hopefully it like pings a realization for you of where in your life you've been operating from the external or realizing that you've actually been feeling alignment because you're going from the internal. So yeah. Anything else to add?
I think I said it all.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We freaking love you guys. We hope you enjoyed. Share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, please subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. It really, really is great for the show. And because we want to continue expanding this, bring on cool guests, and just expand what we're able to do, it is a great, simple, easy help thing to do for the show. So that is all, and we will see you next week. Please reach out, let us know what you thought, comment, etc., etc., and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.